I have a question for everybody, and I get this question all the time, and it's this: should I keep renting, or should I just buy the bullet and buy a house? And it's a very interesting question because I'm a renter. I've always been a renter, but I get why this is very confusing, because there are people who think that renting is throwing money away. And then if you look at home prices, you start to wonder, like, how is anyone even able to afford these homes that we're saying? Like, if you look at prices in GTA, Vancouver, how are we expected to buy a home at these crazy prices? And on top of that, the mortgage rates don't even make sense. The mortgage rates don't make it easier to buy these homes. But here's the thing: renting or buying, it can be the right move for you. It just depends on your own situation. And that's what I'm about to talk about today. And by the end of this video, you understand each option. You understand what the numbers actually look like in Canada right now. And most importantly, you will know how to choose the one that makes sense for you. So let's get into it. Now, before we compare anything, let's get a sense of what we are working with. Let's get a sense of the numbers that we're actually going to review right now. So right now in Canada, the average home price is sitting around $698,000, and that is expected to increase by 3.2% in 2026. Now, the average price is already higher than what most people can afford. If you're in Toronto or Vancouver, you already know that those numbers are even worse, and we're talking houses of well over $1 million in some areas. Now, if you look at the rental side, the average asking rent across Canada is sitting around $2,000 per month, and this was as of April 2026. Now, that's actually cheaper than what it was a year ago, and rents have actually come down in cities like Toronto and Vancouver, but it is still way higher than the pre-2020 levels. And now you might be asking, what about mortgage rates? Well, fixed year 5-year rates are sitting between 4.5% and 5.5% right now. And that's higher than what they were a few years ago. But to be fair, it's still lower than the peak that we saw in 2023. So yeah, the reality is neither renting nor buying is cheap. But cheap is not the only thing that matters. Let's now talk about each path and what they actually give you. But before we do that, let me tell you something that most people overlook about renting. People criticize renting because they believe you are paying someone else's mortgage. And the truth is, there's some element of validity, there's some element of truth in that statement. But here's what most people miss. Renting is actually the smarter move for a lot of people right now in this market. And I'll tell you why. When you rent, your biggest upfront cost is the first and the last month's rent, and maybe a security deposit that you get back at the end of your rental term. You're not paying land transfer tax, you're not paying home inspection fees, no CMHC mortgage insurance, no lawyer fees. Now, when you compare that to buying, where your closing cost alone can run anywhere from 1.5% to 4% of the purchase price, and that's on top of the down payments you've paid for that property. On a $800,000 home, for instance, that's potentially $32,000 just in closing cost alone, before you've even paid a single mortgage payment. Now, renting, on the other hand, and I guess this is why most people like renting gives you flexibility. So if your job changes, if you want to move cities, or if life just takes a turn and you just want to up and leave, you can choose to move out of your current apartment and go where life takes you, or even go where your job takes you. Home ownership, on the other hand, it just locks you in because you can up and uproot a home. And the research is pretty clear that buying a home only gives you that financial leverage if you choose to stay put in that same home for about 7 to 10 years. But here's the flip side. Renting comes with real risks. Your landlord can choose to raise your rent. They might not respond quickly to maintenance requests, and you'll have to cover those costs of those requests, and then you now start chasing your landlord to get a refund. Some landlords are so stubborn that you might have to even take them to court to get your money back, to get your refund back on the maintenance expenses. And in units without rent control, the rent increase can be significant. In fact, my own rent was increased every year for the first 2 years that I lived in this apartment, and that increase only stopped recently, and that was because the average market rate for rent crashed. Over half of Canadian renters, around 54%, are worried that the cost of rent will keep going up. If you're renting long term, you're not building any equity. So renting is not throwing money away, but it has a limit. Now let's talk about buying. And I want to be honest with you, because there's a version of this conversation where someone just hypes up home ownership as if that's the ultimate goal. And I'm not going to do that today. I'm not going to do that to you guys. The average mortgage payment in Ontario right now is around $2,646 per month. And that's before you add things like property taxes, home insurance, and maintenance. When you add all those three together, when you add that in addition to the mortgage payments, home ownership costs in major cities can easily hit $4,000 to $5,000 per month. And if that's eating more than 35% of your gross income, you are what we call house poor, which means you are a homeowner but cash strapped every single month, and that doesn't give you any form of leverage whatsoever. So why would anybody buy a house if you know all of these things? And that's a fantastic question, but here's the answer. Over time, a mortgage works differently from rent. Every payment you make goes partly towards the interest and towards paying down what you owe on the mortgage. And that's how you build equity over time. And if the prices of the home increases over time, you benefit from that as well. And that's something that renters don't enjoy. And there's also another factor where with a fixed rate mortgage, your monthly payment stays the same. You don't have a landlord who's going to increase your rent in December and tell you that your rent is going up. You don't have any of those such problems because you own the home. And if you're thinking long term, like owning your home outright by retirement, that's a very, very powerful position to be in if you choose to own your home, because at retirement, you won't have to worry about rent. So buying isn't wrong. It just has to be done at the right time, at the right price, and with the right foundation under it. Now, here's where things get really interesting, because most people don't have any idea how much support actually exists for first-time home buyers here in Canada. If you've never owned a home or you haven't owned one in the last 4 years, you might qualify for something as a first-time home buyer, and that unlocks some pretty solid tools to work with. So the first home savings account, which is the FHSA, as you rightly know, is probably the most powerful tool that exists, where you can contribute up to $8,000 a year, about $40,000 for the lifetime limit. And your contributions to your FHSA are tax deductible, just like you have in the RRSP. And the withdrawals for a home purchase are completely tax-free, no repayments required, which is different from the RRSP, where you have to pay back your withdrawals, otherwise you'll be charged tax on it. And so if a couple where you have each person with an FHSA, that is $80,000 combined before any investment gains. Then you add the RSP home buyers plan that lets you pull up to $60,000 per person out of your RSP tax-free to put towards your first home. Now, if you combine both programs together, and as a couple, you have up to $200,000 in tax advantage down payment savings. Pretty powerful tools. Now, for RSP withdrawals for home purchase, you need to repay those back. Otherwise, it will be treated as taxable income. So there's also something called the $10,000 first-time home buyers tax credit and a 30-year amortization option, where you can spread your amortization, you can spread your mortgage over 30 years and lower your monthly payments. But the one thing I'll tell you today is, even if you are years away from buying your home, you need to open an FHSA now and put some money inside so that you can unlock the limits, because the contribution room, right, it only accumulates after the account is open. So every month you spend without opening an FHSA, it's literally time that you can't get back. Okay, let's bring it home. And yes, I mean that quite literally, so pun intended. I want you to honestly ask yourself 3 questions, right? 1, how long are you planning to stay? If it's less than 5 to 7 years, renting is probably your best option. And if you're planning to put down roots like having kids, building the community, career stability, then you need to consider buying, because that is the more reasonable option, right? Then the second thing to consider is, what would home ownership actually cost you on a monthly basis in total, not just the mortgage? This is where most people get it wrong. So include things like property tax, insurance, and at least 1% of the home's value per year for maintenance. If those amounts come up to more than 35% of your gross income, you may want to wait and look at a different price range or look at a different city altogether. Now, the third thing to consider is, do you have a solid financial foundation? That means stable income, an emergency fund that won't vanish the minute you have a repair bill to pay, and a down payment that won't drain every single thing you have. If you can check off these 3 boxes, then buying is a great long-term decision. If you can't answer them, that's okay. Renting while you save and invest is a completely valid path, so don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. I want to leave you with this fact. According to a recent CIBC poll, 70% of Canadians who are planning to buy say they are genuinely unsure whether it's even the right time to buy a house. Now, if you're feeling unsure, well, you're not behind. You are not failing in life. You're just in the same boat as most Canadians. The goal isn't to own a home as fast as possible. The goal is to make a decision that fits your life, not your neighbors, not Instagram, your life. And if this video has helped you think through one piece of the puzzle, drop a comment below and let me know. Tell me what side you're on. Are you team renting? Are you team home ownership? Are you a homeowner who is even thinking of renting? I would genuinely love to hear that. So like this video if it's helpful, subscribe for more of this great content, and I'll see you on the next one.